Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a fantasy movie review and I'll be having a look at the movie The Mists of Avalon. So this is actually a TV series in the US and it's been re-edited into a feature-length movie. But obviously it's quite a long one, nearly 3 hours long. This is a film, or mini-series depending on how you look at it, telling the sort of tale of King Arthur, Excalibur and all of that, but from the viewpoint of the women of King Arthur's court. So it's kind of a pro-feminist point of view on this of Arthurian legend. Now this was actually adapted from a novel which was kind of much beloved. Now I've not read the novel first of all, so I'll say that right from the get-go. And I've read a few reviews prior to doing my own one, and a lot of these reviews kind of compare it how it is to the novel. Now I haven't read it, as I say, so I'm really going to just be reviewing it as what it's like as a film and as a kind of piece of filmed entertainment rather than how closely it resembles the novel, for example. Just to give you some perspective on regards to the novel, apparently it does vary to some degree on what the novel set out to do. So just keep that in mind. So as I said, this is really tells a tale of spanning the life of King Arthur and people in his court, but really doesn't actually focus on him as much as, say, more of these sort of supporting characters. Now, this film, I would say, is a very different twist on it. It kind of changes quite a lot of the established things that we've known in this sort of King Arthur's legend. I'm not going to go into the whole plot, to be honest with you. It's just, you probably know it by now. But suffice to say, it does change quite a lot. Pretty much all of the main characters here are actually related. Lancelot and Gwenwyfar are King Arthur's cousins. The Lady of the Lake is King Arthur's aunt. So you get the idea. So pretty much everyone here is kind of related. Now I have to say this film is probably a mixture of one part Excalibur, one part Lord of the Rings, and a whole massive part of this. And if you don't know what that is, if you're too young to realise what that is, you might get an idea with something like this instead. So that's my opinion in a nutshell about what this film is like. It's obviously quite an expensive production, and it kind of looks quite visually interesting. There's lots of fantastic costumes, lots of great sort of photography, but it just plays like a medieval soap opera, I've got to be honest with you. I'm not sure how the novel is, but to me this was Dynasty in medieval times. I actually found it quite boring. There are some sort of action scenes on it, but they kind of are quite dull to look at, to be honest with you. What it says is all the decisions that are made by the men were simply decisions that were manipulated by the women in this story. So one of the kind of, I guess, the major sort of departures from sort of the popular myth of King Arthur is the main character here is Morgaine. And you may know her as Morgan Le Fay or Morgana from other adaptations. And normally she's kind of the villain. But here she's actually probably the main character and is not a villain at all, to be honest with you. And really, I guess you would almost call her the protagonist to a certain degree. And here she's kind of manipulated by other people to sort of end up sleeping with ultimately Arthur and thus giving birth to Mordred. But pretty much you've got Anjelica Huston kind of playing Viviane, who ends up being the Lady of the Lake. Joan Allen sort of playing Morgaine, who is the, I think the aunt to Morgaine. And they all kind of had their own sort of manipulations, and pretty much all of these female characters just pretty much manipulate the men to do whatever they want. Pretty much everything happens from the ideas being brought by one of the female characters. And men here, I think, are treated like pretty much puppets. I suppose the most interesting male character for me was probably Mordred, because he's probably the only one who's maybe a little bit free thinking for himself, although he's obviously a bad guy. Doesn't really appear until the last quarter of this movie anyway. I guess another problem with this movie is I think the casting is way off. You've got, I think, Michael Vartan as Lancelot, Joan Allen. They're the wrong people for this type of film or sort of mini-series, unfortunately. I know this actually is actually quite sort of beloved by some people who find it quite lavish. Although it visually is quite interesting, this film, I didn't really like the story, to be honest with you. I didn't think it was all of that interesting. And for example, Merlin in this, he's barely in it. I mean, he probably has no more than 7-8 minutes of screen time in this film. And it's just, you know, that's a major part of obviously the myth. It kind of really just sort of bypasses it. You have none of the, you see none of the sort of romance between King Arthur and Gwenwyfar. And King Arthur, the guy they've got to play him, is just so dull. He's just not an interesting character. I think Juliana, and I pronounce her name wrong here, Juliana Morgaine, I don't know how you pronounce her name. She plays Morgaine. You know, she's a fairly interesting character, I suppose. It's probably the most interesting one. But overall, I didn't like the casting of this film. I thought it was kind of dull. It plays very much like a soap opera. So if you kind of more like that sort of soapy things, and yeah, you could say, well, kind of Game of Thrones is kind of a bit soapy in a way. There's lots of, it's not so much action in that, and it's all very much sort of behind the scenes and kind of people manipulating political and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, if this film was made now after Game of Thrones, I actually think it will be a whole lot different. But this was pre-Game of Thrones, and it plays more like Dallas, it plays more like Dynasty, that sort of thing. And quite frankly, I found it quite dull. Great to look at, very pretty, you know, some sort of good sort of spooky effects and kind of mystical music and stuff like that. So it's aesthetically it's okay, but story-wise it just wasn't very engaging. It may be better watching it as a two-parter, but obviously I watched it, you know, as a kind of just a standard film, so it was a bit of a chore to sit through, I have to say. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. So probably against the grain from a lot of people on that one, but I just didn't find it that interesting. So have you seen it? Let me know what you think and leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.